Hello, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Let me start today with a huge announcement about a DawgNation invasion. I'm just kidding. 2028 and 2029, we hope to be doing something in Clemson and Texas. That's obviously a long time in the future. We'll talk about that scheduling on today's program. I'll give you kind of what I think is an interesting backstory to all of this. Jeff Sintel here. What a great day to be doing a Marlowe's Tavern tell-all with him. A lot of fallout from a long list of visitors to Georgia on Saturday. I'll talk some recruiting myself before Jeff gets here. And I want to talk some more about this Georgia running game, which I think has really emerged over the course of the last couple of weeks and become a very fun storyline for this 2018 season for Georgia. In other words, it's going to be a packed and busy show, but we also think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're glad you're with us as DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
If y'all will allow me to, my plan this week is to talk a lot of UGA recruiting, and I'll tell you why. You know, Georgia is in the midst of potentially getting back to college football playoff. It's got its in-state rival, Georgia Tech, next week. It's got the SEC championship game the week after that, so there's a lot of work to be done here with the 2018 season, but we're going to blink our eye, whether Georgia's in the playoff or not. We're going to blink our eye, and early signing period in just a few weeks is going to be upon us. The moment the SEC championship game ends, win or lose, it is, pedal to the metal to get this 2019 class all locked and loaded, and I don't want us to get caught off guard by that. I want us to be following a lot of these storylines as they're progressing. We've got some time to do that this week. I want to focus in on some of that without disregarding what's going to happen on the field on Saturday against UMass. I do think there are a few important recruiting storylines for us to really dive into this week. I want to do that, especially coming off of what Georgia just had on Saturday, a big showing against a hated rival with a lot of recruits on hand to see it. There is a lot to talk about. So let me begin with one name in particular. And by the way, Jeff Sintel will be with us later on for even more of this as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern tell-all. Let me start with four-star defensive back Tyreek Stevenson from down in South Florida. What I believe is one of those very short lists, 3, 4, 5 guys at the most who are more important for Georgia in this class right now, at least in terms of uncommitted prospects. You could say no one's more important than Tyreek Stevenson right now. This is a big-time get for Georgia. He's a potential replacement in the future for DeAndre Baker, who is locked down one side of the field as a cornerback for Georgia. And not all that long ago, when Stevenson took some time to meet with a Dog Nation's Jeff Sintel, who, as I said, will join us later on the program, Stevenson made a promise about an official visit to Georgia. Here's a reminder if you missed it the first time around.
So is it safe to say still that Georgia will get an official? Is that still a likely thing there?
Yes, sir. It's just like saying, it's grass green, sir. Georgia would definitely get an official out of it.
I've always loved that line from Stevenson. It's just like saying grass is green. Georgia is definitely going to get an official visit from me. I think that's really cool. Well, this past weekend, Tyreek Stevenson proved to be a man of his word. He did indeed take an official visit to Georgia. In fact, he tweeted out one of those really cool edits to serve as the way that in the modern time social media is proof of this kind of stuff. If you're watching on video, you see this. It's a great-looking shot of Tyreek Stevenson in a Georgia uniform. He's wearing number 7. I guess Georgia's plan in the future is to have 425 people wearing the number 7. But nonetheless, Stevenson looks good in that red and black, looks good in the number 7, and it was good to see him taking an official visit to Georgia this weekend. In fact, if you're watching on video, and this is one of those moments where I guess I do apologize to the radio and the podcast audience a little bit. You won't see this. You can check out the video if you want to check it out, though. We were able to see some of Stevenson in his official visit on Saturday to Georgia. Some of the attention that he was getting, he was down close taking it all in. And as we're talking here today, you'll see some of that video rolling here on the program. Of course, the visit in some form or fashion does go well enough here that over the course of his time there in the immediate aftermath of taking the visit to Georgia this past weekend, Stevenson on his Twitter feed once again does come out with another announcement. And this announcement will kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about here over the course of the next few minutes. Stevenson tweets out, I guess this would have been, was this yesterday, I guess? He says January 5th, and he gives the emoji signal. Stay tuned on ABC. And then he tags Eric Richards, who's one of the leaders of what I used to call the U.S. Army All-American game. It's got another sponsor now, but that's the traditional All-Star game there. Stevenson says, that's the day I'm going to announce my commitment, which ironically is also the same day that 5-star wide receiver Jaden Hayswood plans to announce his commitment there as well. So Stevenson takes an official visit to Georgia, on the field, getting up close and personal look at the team while they're working out, and in the immediate aftermath of that official visit, says, I'm going to announce at the U.S. Army All-American game, or what used to be known as the U.S. Army All-American game, coming up in January. Now, Stevenson has told DawgNation before that All-Star game announcement was a possibility. At one point, he thought maybe there was a chance that he would do it a little earlier, but the All-Star game as his date has kind of always been in his mind. Here's a little bit more from Stevenson on that topic.
Right now, I'm trying to work my tail off, graduate early. If I don't graduate early, then it has to be the All-Star game. But if I graduate early, then it's got to be right after the season. Well, if I'm on the verge of graduating early, it's going to have to be right over the season. So everything just playing a part right now. So as anybody else, I'm just stringing along myself. That's why I can't really get nobody a clear answer on anything.
So you won't go later than the All-Star games, right?
No, sir. I have my mind made up by then.
So at the time, he couldn't go with a clear date of when he's going to make his commitment, but he does have that now. It will be early January as part of that All-Star game, and he says that on the heels of his Georgia official visit. Now, here's why all of this is important. First of all, I referenced this earlier. I think when you look at uncommitted players for Georgia, there are few, and there may be none, who are more valuable potentially to this 2019 class than what Tyreek Stevenson would be. You can also say that about other defensive backs as well. A guy like, say, Khair Alam from, generally speaking, the same part of the world down there in South Florida, who's sort of generated some Georgia steam on social media and online as of late. Both these defensive backs are big-time targets, and it was nice to see Georgia roll out the red carpet for Stevenson this past weekend, and nice to think about how Stevenson may be thinking about that visit as he heads towards that decision in January. Let me do my best, though, to maybe give you a little idea of maybe what is in his head when it comes to some of this kind of stuff. First of all, this is a guy who's been very, very outspoken in the past about how much he likes Georgia. When asked by Jeff Sintel, and we've played this for you on Before the Hedges in the past, but when asked, what is it you like about Georgia, there's an overall vibe and a feel that Stevenson seems to get from UGA that may not be matched by any of the other schools that are competing for him, including his more in-city school, the University of Miami. It sounds like Georgia's just got something special and unique for him. Here is Stevenson again on that topic.
The way the team on the rise, how the team connects as a brotherhood, and the coaches just Georgia, it's real peaceful, and then the facility is great. All the recruiters and everybody just in the facility is always in a good mood. So I like that. One thing I like about Georgia.
I like that description too. Everybody around the facility is always in a good mood, and if you're Georgia right now, how could you not be in a good mood? You've swept the East for 2 consecutive years. You've won all those games by more than 14 points. You were vanquishing rivals left and right. You dominated Florida a couple of weeks ago. You put Auburn in a very bad place as a program after another big win against them this past Saturday. I would imagine around that Georgia facility, everyone is in a really good mood right now, and there is a real contagious vibe. And a guy like Tyreek Stevenson and some of the other recruits we'll talk about over the course of today's program, my guess is they do want to be a part of that. They want to gravitate towards that. It's not really a surprise to hear Stevenson say that at all, and it's probably not a surprise to also hear what Stevenson says Kirby Smart's message has been to him along this process of Stevenson leading up to his ultimate decision. Here's why Kirby tells him that he thinks Stevenson should become a dog.
What does Kirby tell you?
We're trying to dominate, put Georgia back on the map as the top SEC schools, and we need dogs like you to do it.
We need dogs like you to do it, and I do like that from Stevenson. One more from him real quick. In terms of maybe how he enjoyed his official visit, one of the reasons why I'm confident that he probably enjoyed it a lot, beyond just the fact that most official visits seem to go pretty well, is the fact that previous visits that Stevenson's taken to Georgia have also gone really well, too. If you want a potential foreshadowing of what the decision come early January could be when Stevenson announces his commitment, well, let's go back in time here. Stevenson was on campus in the summer for what they called the reveal. Do you remember when that brand-new West End Zone facility was open for the first time and recruits got a chance to come and see the new Georgia locker room and the new Georgia recruiting facility that'll house these guys and serve as a hospitality area when they attend games like the one that Stevenson attended on Saturday? Well, Stevenson said at the time he had such a good time at the reveal that he almost committed on the spot and had to pump the brakes then to keep from making what he thought might be too rash of a decision. Here's one more clip from Stevenson.
I talked to my mom about it, and my mom was like, we're on your time. Don't make a decision off, how much excitement you have at one event. Just keep visiting and seeing what's up. Man, my mom is really into it, so we really talked about it. So it crossed, and then I missed it, and then it went away. Like we talked about it on my time and how I'm gonna do it this way and that way. So
So it was thought of, maybe chopped up, and you decided not to make a quick decision or a rush or an impulsive decision, right?
Yeah, so that's what it really was.
So the bottom line for me is, and the reason why I wanted to start the show this way, I know I just gave you a lot of information, so let me kind of process all of this in just a couple of easy ideas that are bite-sized enough that everybody can remember them. A player that Georgia really needs, a four-star defensive back who could be a replacement for DeAndre Baker, just took a visit to Georgia on the heels of taking some previous visits. It seems like this young man that Georgia really wants has a strong relationship with Georgia. So if you're just now starting to do some of your homework for that 2019 class, write this name down, and many of you have already had it etched in stone for a while. Four-star defensive back Tyreek Stevenson could be one of the centerpieces of Georgia's 2019 class. He'll make his announcement in January. It could be good news for the Dogs, and if it is, then Georgia could be well on its way to building another outstanding class here for 2019. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Marco's Pizza, and glad you are with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter feed, all the DawgNation video channels. Radio at noon with our friends in Athens on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and in podcast form, wherever you find podcasts, whether you subscribe as an Apple Podcast player or the Android device on the Google Podcast player, you listen on the world-famous DawgNation.com, you check out the show on SoundCloud. We're just really glad you've been a part of DawgNation Daily for all these years. Good to have you with us here today as well, and we appreciate Marco's Pizza for making it all possible as well. And by now you know that Marco's treats every day like game day. They always bring their best. That means dough made fresh, an original recipe in the sauce, and 3 signature cheeses on every pizza. It's every store, every day, the Italian way. You can say hello primo by going to marcos.com and ordering yours today. Good to have you here. Jeff Sintel coming up later on. We'll do a Marlowe's Tavern tell-all with Jeff Sintel as we get more into Stevenson's official visit and some of the other big-time names that do come to Georgia on Saturday. Jeff will give us kind of the behind-the-scenes details on some of that. We'll do that in a moment. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse here. Here on this Tuesday, brought to you by Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa in beautiful Towns County, Georgia. And let me start our Around the Doghouse today with a pretty simple question. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago, it was right before the Georgia-Florida game, and John Emery Jr., the 5-star running back, decommitted from Georgia? And at the time, boy, I really took that as bad news, and it's still not great. Let's not gloss this over. Georgia lost the commitment from a 5-star running back. That's always going to be a big deal. But in the immediate aftermath of that moment, what was one of the most difficult things for me to wrestle with was Emery's description of why he decommitted. Once again, speaking straight to Jeff Sintel. And please don't ever forget for a second how lucky I think we all are around DawgNation that Jeff Sintel's got such a great pipeline into these recruits. All the audio you just heard from Tyreek Stevenson, those were direct quotes that Stevenson gave to Jeff Sintel as a part of Before the Hedges and some of the written work that Jeff's done. The conversation we're going to have here on John Emery Jr., all once again based on a direct conversation that Emery has with Sintel as we head towards early signing period coming up really in just a few weeks. Don't forget where your bread's butter when it comes to getting that great UGA recruiting information. Totally 100% for free. That's really good stuff and strong stuff from Jeff Sintel. But with that said, I don't want to inflate his ego any more than it already is. Let me get back to John Emery Jr. here because, as disappointed as I was when Emery decommitted from Georgia, the thing that kind of rattled around in my head was the reasoning just doesn't make sense. The reasoning just seems a little weird because Emery tells Jeff that it's about the depth chart. And Jeff says, well, could you ever reconsider Georgia? And he says, yeah, if the depth chart were to change. And what was so weird about that at the time was it didn't seem like Georgia's depth chart at running back was necessarily all that deep. I mean, Zamir White's hurt. We haven't seen him play at all. At the time, right before the Florida game, when Emery says this, we hadn't seen from DeAndre Swift what we would see against Kentucky, what we did see this past Saturday against Auburn. Swift now looks like the guy we always thought he could be. But at the time, we hadn't seen that. Elijah Holyfield, I think, because of the Florida game and the Kentucky game and last week's game when he had almost 100 yards rushing, he seems like a better player now than he did at the time that Emery said the thing about the depth chart. Well, John Emery Jr. is a great running back. He knows his position better than I know it. What if he was right all along? What if this really was a deep, loaded group of running backs who were just waiting on DeAndre Swift to get a little healthier, just waiting on Elijah Holyfield to get more of a chance in the spotlight to shine? And what if James Cook is also waiting the wings, maybe equal to what we would expect from a number 5 running back in the country from 2018? What if John Emery Jr., having been on campus, having met with these guys, having seen parts of this kind of stuff that we haven't seen, what if he knew all along how deep this running back position really is? I think it's an interesting thing to think about because we've all learned this really fast, but guys like Emery who truly knew the position, maybe they knew that all along. In fact, it's been a part of the conversation that Kirby Smart's had with the media when it comes to running backs. Kirby remains emphatic that he always knew that these guys were good. Holyfield, while he was running sometimes scout team a year ago. DeAndre Swift, while his carries were limited this year, sometimes due to injury. Kirby, will tell you that he always knew that these guys were capable of what they've been showing the last couple of weeks. In fact, he's stated that pretty explicitly and adamantly within the last couple of weeks. Here's Kirby just after the Kentucky game.
They've always been good players, guys. I mean, I'm not going to say that maturation, that they played better tonight because they played before. They had good open holes. They ran hard. Receivers blocked well. They continue to run hard. They're very confident in the group in front of them. Thought Coach Channing had a good plan against what was a really good defense. I mean, teams struggle to score against them mainly because of their experience. They have veterans in the back end. They don't make a lot of mistakes. So you got to grind out points, and knows we grind them out. We grind out a lot of threes where we should be scoring touchdowns.
Well, be that as it may, we're all seeing now just how good DeAndre Swift, when fully healthy, really is. And we're discovering what Kirby Smart's apparently known for a while, that Elijah Holyfield's also a very good running back, too, who was just waiting his turn to be on the field. Maybe John Emery Jr., who has a little better insight on this position, a little more access to inside information, maybe he knew this all along. Today's Around the Doghouse is brought to you by Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa in Towns County, Georgia, one of the prettiest places in the state, really one of the prettiest places in the world. And, of course, as the fall rolls on here, leaves are changing color in the northeast Georgia mountains, and it's the perfect time to get away to a Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa. It's just a couple hours away from Atlanta. It's a real easy drive, and they've got a special discount right now for DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers. You can get 20% off any rooms booked between now and March 31st. Just use the promo code DAWG18. That's DAWG18. DAWG18 to receive your Brasstown Valley Resort DawgNation Daily Special. You can also go to BrasstownValley.com to book your getaway. The discount's available until December 31st. Also, let me tell you about this. We are continuing to do our great Get Out of the Doghouse giveaway. As I joked before, many of you get into the doghouse this time of year because of how much football you watch. Well, DawgNation Daily and Brasstown Valley Resort are going to give you a chance to get out of the doghouse as well. One lucky winner is going to receive a 4-day, 3-night trip for two to Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa, which includes spa treatments, stable trail rides, 2 rounds of golf with the cart, and so much more. Let's go to Get Out of the Doghouse. Once again, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG. GetOutOfTheDoghouse.com to enter. All right, it's great to have you with us here on the program today. For more on the UGA recruiting stuff, including a busy weekend for visitors for the Auburn game, let's talk to Jeff Sintel right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will start our Marlowe's Tavern tell-all right now and say hello to Jeff Sintel. By the way, speaking of you, if you want to be able to tell about all the great things happening at the Marlowe's in your neighborhood, the best way to do that is become a Marlowe's Tavern insider. Text the word Marlowe's, that's MARLOWS, to 24242, and you can become a Marlowe's Tavern insider and have great access to great special offers, great events. We've got a huge event coming up at Marlowe's in a couple of weeks. I've been sworn to secrecy about telling you about some of this yet, but I believe it's going to be maybe the biggest Marlowe's event we've ever done. That's going to be an awesome time coming up in a couple of weeks. So let me hold off on telling you about that for right now and say hello instead to Jeff Sintel. Jeff, happy Tuesday. Thanks for being with us on the program. Hope you're doing well today.
Brandon, man, you sound like the ultimate tease, man. Genuine Marlowe's tidbits and that Marlowe's intel, but then pulling it away at the last second there, sir. What are you trying to do, promote something or something, man?
No doubt about that. And speaking of promotion, there was plenty for Georgia to promote on Saturday. It gets a huge win against Auburn, really put on a great show. I thought the crowd was at its best, and if you're a recruit, like, say, for instance, 5-star linebacker NAKOBE Dean, you no doubt saw a lot to enjoy about that. He was hard to miss down there on the field before the game started on Saturday. Any thoughts from you about how this visit for Dean, who at one point in time was considering Auburn, although I don't think there's any chance he goes there. It seems like we may be down to a Georgia-Bama showdown when it comes to a Dean services, just given the way that some of the other schools have faltered and the fact that I don't take LSU that seriously as a recruiting threat. Any thoughts from you on the Dean visit to Georgia this past weekend?
that's an interesting one, Brandon. I would say that I would probably lump another team in there. I would even probably put LSU in there as maybe the third team, but I do think there's some distance there between Georgia and Alabama. The thing he wants to do is he wants to get his choice down to one or two schools by the time he takes that last LSU visit. LSU is a program that he's visited quite a lot. I think the only one he's been to more than LSU would probably be Ole Miss, and then it would be Alabama after that. So that's one that I think everyone, he can kind of probably put the team he likes the best on a pedestal by then, and then it's up to LSU to kind of knock that school off with that official visit there. But it was a great trip, I would say, for that family. It was really what he wanted to see was game day vibe, things like fans showing ultimate support, and I think fans hanging around in, 39-degree, 40-degree weather when the team was up handily in the middle of the fourth quarter. I think those sort of things always play really nice in front of the recruits.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I had to leave at the I always generally leave at the start of the fourth quarter to go get ready for our Northside Hospital postgame show, and I always wait for after the light-up when there's going to be a light-up. I wait for after the light-up to start walking over, and as I was walking over to the UGA bookstore for our Northside Hospital postgame show, I, was also seeing some fans also leaving the stadium. And my thought was, boy, I hope everybody's just not going to leave now that the light-up has taken place. Georgia's only up by 17. How about you stay and enjoy the win against Auburn? And then as I walked across the bridge, you did get the sense that, 95% of the stadium was going to stay in place. They were going to make that thing still feel like a big-time atmosphere for the fourth quarter. And Jeff, I have to say, I thought in particular about Dean because Dean had told you directly that was one of the things that he was really looking forward to seeing. He'd been on Georgia's campus in the past. He got to know the football program, maybe the university pretty well, but he didn't really see the vibe around campus when it's full of people and when it's full of, fans who travel in for a game day. That's one of the things that Dean, going into the visit, said that he really wanted to see. And as someone who obviously hopes Dean does come to Georgia, I was very glad to walk away with the feeling that he probably got that.
Yeah, I would think if, when all said and done, if NAKOBE Dean says that maybe the reason he didn't choose Georgia was because the crowd and the environment on his official visit wasn't live or wasn't electric enough, as Kirby Smart said in his postgame presser, I don't know how much more Georgia can do. I mean, I think when you notice those fans maybe trickling out of the stadium a little bit, did you make sure whether or not those were Auburn fans, my friend?
Oh, yeah, there was definitely some orange and blue from that group kind of straggling its way out of the stadium there at that point, which is a great point. It's great to have Jeff Sintel as part of our Marlowe's Tavern tell-all here today. Let me talk about another guy here for a moment, a 2020 offensive lineman, Justin Rogers. And as I talk, I want to show a couple of tweets here. First of all, the black jerseys were such a big topic leading into the Auburn game. I thought it was really funny to see Justin Rogers tweet out his own picture of himself, full uniform here, also wearing the Georgia black jersey, and then another picture from Justin Rogers showing himself there with offensive line coach Sam Pittman. And then let me read this caption here because I think it's really important. Justin Rogers, the 5-star offensive lineman for the class of 2020, says, "I've been a dog since a youngster. #GoDawgs." We need to teach him that dog is spelled D-A-W-G, but nonetheless, that's what he tweets out there. And, boy, Jeff, you couldn't ask for much more than that from Rogers coming into town for the Georgia-Auburn game. The affection with Sam Pittman is evident from the tweet. The status of Georgia among a couple other schools for Rogers, no doubt, but a strong consideration here. Hard to deny that Georgia has continued to make a pretty big impact on a big-time offensive lineman for 2020, correct?
Yeah, and we've been writing about Justin for a while. To me, Georgia has kind of been his leader since probably May, June of this year, even before he came down for a trip during the summer and also for the reveal. I think one of the things maybe people don't know about Justin Rogers in the 2020 puzzle, because it's such a huge line of scrimmage year for Georgia. I think this might be the class, especially that they've seen 3 or 4 full cycles of Kirby Smart recruiting. This might be the one where both the offensive line and the defensive line boxes get checked with a lot of those 5 stars that Mr. Brandon Adams likes to see get checked. But
sure.
In reference to Rogers, I want to just kind of point out a couple things I see in relation to how that new west end zone, all those $34 million or whatever, no, that was the indoor practice facility. I think the $60+ million were spent. So Sam Pittman pregame walks, climbs up into the stands, goes up into the stands to talk, basically give Rodgers a hug, and that's something how the west end zone can kind of play in that pregame experience now for Georgia, where the recruits are all on one side of the field. And I tell you though, maybe there might be an upgrade down the line for maybe some space heaters or some heated seats in the stands, because it seemed to me like a lot of the players after the pregame warm-up, a lot of the marquee recruits found their way up into the recruiting lounge and the chicken finger central and the I guess that's canes that's all up in there, but also just the warmth and the TVs and everything else like that. They're hanging out there, which I guess is a good thing, but they don't really get a sense of that environment, that crowd, especially. There were moments of the night where the Georgia crowd could have done a little more. I think that's the most honest way to say that. But the other thing I did notice was, and it was kind of like a lot of the Midwestern player recruits. You saw Trevor Keegan stay in the front row longer than most. NAKOBE Dean and his family was down there more than most. Brian Brzee, who will have some information coming up on the side about his visit soon. How all that stuff went down, but it seemed to me like the guys that were either on officials that needed to soak up that moment a little bit more than others. Guys like Trayvon Walker and Nolan Smith, they've been in Sanford Stadium, I think, at least a dozen times. But for those guys that were on their officials, that for maybe it was their first game day experience at UGA, especially in Sanford Stadium, guys like Kenny McIntosh, Keegan, NAKOBE Dean, Tyreek Stevenson, guys like that, they needed to kind of place themselves in that moment. But sometimes with a big November game, when it's maybe the matter there for Georgia is to show off the recruiting lounge rather than the ultimate recruiting tool, which is what I think would be Sanford Stadium crowd between the hedges, where all those recruits start to project themselves playing down there on that field in front of those 94,000 fans.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Jeff. Let me talk about somebody else who was in there on Saturday. Here's a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, and that's the four-star running back Kenny McIntosh, who seemed to have a good time. We'll once again go to his own social media feed for some of this. First of all, he tweets out about being at the visit. We will show you that, at least for the folks who are watching on video. McIntosh taking a moment to let folks know. Once again, it's black jerseys for him, and once again, just like Justin Rogers, he takes a position with his position coach, Dale McGee here, and McIntosh looks good wearing the number 1 jersey there as a part of that. So he's clearly having a good time and loving wearing the Georgia uniform. And one of the other things that McIntosh also does, our buddy Bryce Dixon, who you may see on Twitter a lot or around the DawgNation message boards, Facebook, things like that, he had at one point in time tweeted out a picture of the crowd being called and led by Thomas Davis, the calling of the dogs before the game. McIntosh actually retweeted that video from my buddy Bryce Dixon, who's always a fixture around DawgNation here. So, you almost get the sense that much like a tourist visiting a big city for the first time, Kenny McIntosh really, and for the folks watching on video, we're seeing this right now, really soaking in that crowd and that experience. And I thought that Thomas Davis, first of all, did a great job calling the dogs. That's not an easy job to do, and Davis really embraced it. And McIntosh seemed to really enjoy that. Jeff, as a Georgia fan, I don't know one way or another what this means, but you'd rather have guys tweeting this kind of stuff than not, I guess.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, lots of times I don't think you can focus on social media. Like, some kids just do that in order to pay homage or at least show gratitude for extending a lot of hospitality in the visit. The one thing that would surprise me is if a recruit ever starts tweeting out pictures in the white jersey. That would just be really awkward and weird. I don't know how many of those we ever see when the recruits pick the white jersey on the long rack for all their photos. And I guess it's always good to get our buddy Bryce in a little DawgNation Daily moment here on the show as well. I mean, that guy is rocking the Jeremiah Holloman jersey I saw at the game against Auburn. So that's a good seal of approval from the fan base when some number 9 jerseys are showing up. But I guess big picture, Kenny McIntosh, as we've written about, kind of going to be a weird thing that's going to happen at running back for Georgia. As I wrote in the forum, kind of yesterday. I think the big questions for Georgia football down the stretch, at least the next 2 or 3 months, is I think that Georgia will continue to recruit from a position of strength, and a position of strength means that I don't think I'll just say I think several very good players will be turned away from this class. I think numbers will be a priority, and maybe the big storyline heading into the early signing period for Georgia, it will be how many early enrollees that Georgia can take. I'm doing my math, and it looks like about 12 to 14 want to come to Georgia, and yet I don't know if they're going to have enough spots for that, especially by the time January of 2019 rolls around. And then there's the best available player. There's also the program's needs at certain positions where this has happened before, where a player wants to enroll early, and the school, the Bulldogs themselves, don't have enough spots to enroll a player early, and they end up choosing another school simply because there's no room at the Kirby Smart indoor practice facility, I would say. So that these are good things that the fan base will probably welcome about how Georgia gets to choose from among the very best players. But it's going to be very interesting. And I guess I kind of went in that direction about Kenny McIntosh because DJ Williams was also there.
Yep.
DJ Williams is kind of the 3-star running back. I think he's actually a 2-star running back from Sebring High School in Florida that's kind of been hiding for weeks. That's what Georgia had hoped it could do with DJ Williams. Now, I know, Brandon, you're not going to pound the table about any 2-star commitment. One that's currently, I think, still committed to Appalachian State. But he's interesting. He showed up in his sophomore year, moved into a school, and there were some talented upperclassmen backs and seniors that got a lot of carries. And then the junior year, DJ Williams hurt. Now in his senior year, his tape's out. Everybody's going gaga over how well he looks. He's one of those seniors that finally flashed his ability in his senior year. His tape looks very good, Brandon. And he's also averaging, much like Kenny McIntosh, over 10 yards per carry. So it'll be very interesting, what can Georgia do at running back? Do they just take one, giving the tough choices they're going to have to make at other positions? And what that means for Georgia in terms of, is it Noah Cain? Is it DJ Williams? Is it Kenny McIntosh? Who knows how these things will play out? But I think some clarity will come in the next few days.
Well, I will tell you this. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds on this because I got some other things I want to ask you about. But you bring up an interesting point about the idea of a, quote, 2-star or very low 3-star prospect. The one thing these Georgia coaches have shown, though, is that they are pretty good at identifying these potential diamonds in the rough. I'll give you a quick example. I mean, I always, with all due respect, thought it was just bizarre that Georgia, for at least a brief period of time, accepted the commitment of a defensive back, Rashad WildGoose, a year ago that was about as lowly rated as any player that Georgia would ever consider would be. But, Jeff, do you know that WildGoose has started for, Wisconsin all year long? And that's, maybe no great shakes. Wisconsin's not that good this year. But this is a starter at defensive back as a freshman. I mean, maybe when Georgia reaches down there and, talks to some of these more lowly rated prospects, maybe they actually do know what they're doing a little bit.
Yeah, Brendan, you touched on a couple things right there. As far as evaluation of personnel, I'd have to put Georgia's recruiting minds up at the top of the nation in terms of that. I think their radius and their accuracy zone is heightened when it's in South Florida. James Coley has some tremendous contacts down there. He knows basically every high school coach and a lot of trainers and a lot of families down there. They give him a pretty good pipeline of information based on his years down there in Miami and recruiting that area. But there's also Del McGee here as far as running back go. That's probably the ultimate filter. I mean, Brandon, I could write a story probably next week about McGee finding a cricket or a lacrosse player from Istanbul that he thinks is the next great running back. And I'm pretty sure that Del McGee offering that young man a scholarship would probably, in the minds of a lot of Georgia fans, especially even those that follow recruiting, they would probably say Del yes if he ever offered a player that seemed unorthodox, because that gentleman's reputation is so strong right now in recruiting running back. Yeah,
that's exactly right. All right, let me try to roll through a lot of stuff here in the time we have left because I don't want to keep it too long, although there are a couple of things I do want to get some thoughts on from you. First of all, let you respond to something I said a little earlier, that when John Emery Jr. told you a few weeks ago that he decommitted from Georgia because of the running back depth, That seemed weird to me at the time because Georgia didn't look all that deep at the moment. We didn't see DeAndre Swift doing then the things we see him doing now, and Elijah Holyfield at the time was also still a bit of a work in progress. And yet after the last 2 games, Kentucky and Auburn, maybe Emory Jr. just knows his position better than the rest of us do. Maybe he saw what was going to emerge for this team over the course of the last couple of weeks. It is kind of interesting how much deeper Georgia looks at running back now than it did a few weeks ago when Emory first decided to decommit from the program. I feel a lot better about that position group now than I did a few weeks ago, and that's even before a guy like Noah Cain comes to Georgia for an expected visit this Saturday. It's interesting how this group is blossoming, is it not?
Yeah, it is, and I wonder, one of my kind of individual theories I had about John Emery's visit to Georgia for the Tennessee game is he got a really good look at James Cook. He got a really good look at DeAndre Swift. He got a good look at, regardless of Herschel Walker telling him that this was the place to be, he got a really good look at a lot of the backs in the program, and that he got a really good sense of Georgia. He got a really good sense of what it looks like for a game day, but he also got a good sense of the talent base as well. And Emory, who just took a visit to his father's alma mater at Tennessee over the weekend, is the 5-star back and still very much at the top of the class. But it seems with Georgia, with gentlemen like Williams and Kenny McIntosh and Noah Cain to look at for their back in the class of 2019. It seems the options are definitely going to be there for the program in whatever direction it decides to go.
All right, Tyreek Stevenson, I started the show by talking about him. We now know what the commitment date's going to be. The All-Star game there, I think, is January 4th. He told you before that was a possibility for his decision. He takes an official visit to Georgia. This is a guy who I would say, it's probably safe to say, Georgia has knocked it out of the park when he's visited in the past. This is one of those ones, Jeff, that I, as a fan, feel really good about here. And where Stevenson to make a different decision in January, I guess that'd be a big-time gut punch right now because it just seems like the stars are starting to align with UGA and Stevenson. How do you feel about that, given the information that you've been able to gather as of late?
Yeah, Dream Chaser was there. You saw the look on his face as he was watching the Bulldogs warm up, especially their receivers. In the early stages of the game, he had a Georgia jacket on. That's kind of not too uncommon. But we see consistently it has just been Miami and Georgia for Tyreek Stevenson. And I think the Bulldogs would hold up well in that head-to-head comparison.
Yeah, Miami.
Even if Mark Richt was, soaring over hurdles and checking all the boxes for that fan base, I still think Georgia would have held up well in that comparison. They continue to take meaningful trips to Georgia, and I think it would be very interesting when the postscript is written on the 2019 class at Georgia, how influential that scavenger hunt back in May was, because there were a lot of dudes there. There was Jermaine Johnson, there was Nolan Smith, there was NAKOBE Dean, there was Ryan Trouble Davis. Tyreek Stevenson was there. Jaden Hazelwood was even there. John Rice Plumlee was even there, who won the event. The quarterback Smarts actually won that event amongst all those top prospects. But it was NAKOBE Dean, as we mentioned earlier, he was there. It'd be very interesting to see how well in the long run that recruiting weekend paid off. I remember the Deans telling me that they said that experience was so good, how Georgia kind of camouflaged or transformed the campus tour into a scavenger hunt where it wasn't, we got to go see this building and this building and this building, and this is how the next 3 hours of your life are going to be spent. It was a kind of a pursuit of a fun party game theme where a lot of the chatter could be taken in golf carts or from one place to another searching for clues. It was very funny how Georgia found the dean of the engineering department to include into the Kobe Dean search party, so to speak, when he wants to study engineering at Georgia. Just some very smart recruiting, definitely no pun intended with that one, that may play out very well in the long run. And on January 5th, that now seems to be like, where in the world is Jeff going to be on January the 5th with Jaden Hazelwood deciding, Tyreek Stevenson deciding? That's definitely a name. That's definitely one of those days to keep in mind for Georgia recruiting going forward, especially in the class of 2019.
All right, very, very fast here before we let you go as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All. How important was it in your eyes to get Clay Webb back on campus? There had been a lot of chatter about this five-star offensive lineman in Clemson as of late. I guess reported multiple visits here to Clemson recently, too. How important was it for Georgia to get a chance to do some more face-to-face contact with Webb after all this Clemson talk as of late?
Very important. I think, especially with the tea leaves or what we're hearing, what I'm hearing about maybe Webb is not going to take a whole lot more visits at all. I would be very curious to see if he makes another visit, even the ones to Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl, as to whether or not he'll be there for that one. And this was a good family visit. I saw all the principal family members there for Clay Webb again. His mother was there. He watched again. It's kind of funny. You can kind of pick up sometimes about how long a prospect watches the game in shivering conditions to see what their interest level is like in Georgia. Bill Norton was up there. In some ways, it's a pretty easy litmus to find out which guys are really passionate about Georgia football. And
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Off of it.
Can I stop you for 1 second, Jeff? Because you said the same thing a year ago about Justin Fields during the Samford game, that he sat there and watched that game all the way up until the half while everybody else was going to get themselves something to eat in a very different recruiting facility, admittedly, a year ago. But you said that you thought that was really indicative of Fields last year, and that turned out to be true. So that's not the first time you've mentioned that before, and I just wanted to make sure that people have the context for that.
Yeah, that's show and not tell reporting to some extent, where just really, to me, that's a great gauge to see how invested they are currently in Georgia football, and they don't want to take their eyes off of it when they get the chance to watch the team compete.
All right, before we say goodbye, you mentioned this before. You kind of accused me here as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All of teasing ahead to a big event coming up. I guess you kind of returned the favor a little bit with a little bit of a hint that you've got some information coming about the big 5-star defensive prospect for the 2020 class, Brian Brzee, who I really have not heard a lot from as of late, but it sounds like you've got something about to drop at DawgNation.com. So, Jeff, we'll look forward to getting ready to read about that and some really good intel coming on a guy that was in Athens on Saturday and one of the centerpieces of the 2020 class, and a very contested recruitment right now with Georgia and a lot of, outside the region foes, the Penn States, the Ohio States, programs like that. It could be quite a battle for Brzee here, and it sounds like you've got some stuff coming on him.
Yeah, with so many prospects, it's kind of funny. Where do you start writing? Where do you stop? Where do you start? I thought it was good to kind of start covering things from the highest-rated prospect that was there in Athens on Saturday. That's the number 1 overall prospect of the 2020 class, and even though the number 2 overall prospect, and Nolan Smith, was also there in the 2019 class, it's just very interesting what's going on there with a young man and his family that took what amounts to be another very positive trip to the University of Georgia.
Great stuff, Jeff. We appreciate that. I'll also look forward to seeing you Wednesday for Before the Hedges with plenty more on all this exciting time. We're really not that far away from the early signing period, so I'm glad to get the recruiting update for you. Thanks so much for being here, a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Jeff gets the early hook. He got the hook. We played him off the stage, much like the Academy Awards. There, his goodbye, shortened for time, I guess. But it's always good to have Jeff Sentell on the program. Fascinating recruiting information there. Really appreciate that from Jeff Sentell as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All every Tuesday here on DawgNation Daily. Before we do our SEC Through, and I've got an update on a story we talked about yesterday. Let me also talk for a moment about my friends at MyBookie. And, of course, you would know by now I've been talking about MyBookie for a while. It's the only sports book we would recommend because they are known as the fast, no-hassle payout when you do win. Because, after all, when you finally get that bet down, you finally get to the winner's circle, you want to get paid. Well, MyBookie gives you a chance to do that. And it's not just the straight bets as well. It's also things like the parlays where you can bet a little bit of money. Pick 3 teams. You may win a lot of money. It's a great way to get huge return on the money you do put down. And it's not just college football. College basketball started. I think that's a really fun sport to bet on. But it's also like NHL. It's esports. You can do over-unders on fantasy sports. There's really no end to what you can do with MyBookie, including in-game wagering, the best player perks in the business. You want to check them out, and you want to take advantage right now. What is a great offer from my friends at MyBookie. Right now, when you use the promo code DawgNation, that's all one word, spelled DAWG, DawgNation, you can get 50% off your, not 50% off, let me try that again. Your first deposit can be matched up to 50%. That means you put your money in, they're going to give you 50% extra. They're going to match that first deposit when you use the promo code DawgNation. But you got to go right now. Find MyBookie online. That's MyBookie. Find MyBookie online. Use the promo code DawgNation. Then after that, you play. You win. You get paid. It's as simple as that with MyBookie. But you've got to use the promo code DawgNation. All right, yesterday, I talked about Nick Saban. What I believe has the appearance of a mishandling of the quarterback situation there. I think that Tua Tagovailoa, to my eyes, looks hurt. The reason why I say that is because on a touchdown run against LSU, he immediately grabbed his knee at the end of that run. One big hit to the knee against Mississippi State, he's immediately grabbing that knee on the heels of that hit. That's not normal. That's not what quarterbacks normally do after runs and after hits. They don't grab their knee the way that Tua Tagovailoa does. Also, go look at Tua's stats when he has played as of late, including Mississippi State on Saturday. This is a guy that's statistically not putting up the same numbers he was earlier in the season. You know, a big reason that oftentimes players see a downgrade in performance is because of injury. I believe that Tua Tagovailoa at the moment looks like a hurt quarterback. But Nick Saban's not buying that. He was asked yesterday if maybe it was the right decision not to play Tua in the game coming up against the Citadel, a game in which Alabama's probably favored by like 90 or 95 points. And I mean that only half-kiddingly. But Saban, who can be somewhat obstinate at times, as you know, pushes back on that yesterday. Let me read you the quote here from Bama Online. Saban says on the subject of not playing Tua, no, why would we do that? Say this is not an important game or he doesn't need to play? I mean, I think we need to do a better job of the people playing around him doing what they're supposed to do so he doesn't get hit. And they need to do a better job of stepping in the pocket and getting rid of the ball, which had several opportunities to do so. Some of these hits can be avoided just by better execution. I think that's what we're going to do and focus on, not taking the guy out of the game so he can improve or do what he needs to do to get better, or we need to do, and he just goes on to kind of say the same thing over and over again. Let some other coach other than Nick Saban say that, and let's see how the media chooses to cover it. But obviously the dominant media entity in college football right now, the ESPN, because of what I believe is a pretty cozy relationship with a guy that I've called Stephen A. Saban based on the number of appearances he's made on ESPN, you're going to hear that as much. I mean, you hear Kirby Smart raked over the coals all the time for how he's handled Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, and I don't know. What seems to be going on here with Tua Tagovailoa is potentially a much more high-risk situation. Now, I'm obviously not a doctor. There's a chance I'm just wrong about all of this, and Tua's fine, and that he's, every time he grabs his knee, it's not as bad as it looks. But, boy, this seems like a risky situation when there's nothing really to gain by playing against the Citadel, playing Tua against the Citadel. It's a weird situation. Saban obviously can't be told anything by anyone. You almost wonder if he's being too stubborn for his own good here when it comes to this. Staying in the state of Alabama here just for a moment, I think it's been fun as a Georgia fan to watch the reaction of Auburn fans after Auburn lost to Georgia on Saturday. This is a fan base that's not happy with its coach right now. And maybe that's the way they should feel. Maybe it's not. I'm probably not close enough on a daily basis of that to know. But everything that you hear in terms of Malzahn coming back, and I believe he's going to, no matter what Auburn tried to float to the media earlier this season, they're not going to pay this buyout 1 year into the contract. I think it would be grounds for dismissal of the university president were they to do that. It's just the kind of Stephen Leach, I believe is the guy's name. You're just not going to be able to do that this early on there. But one of the things that I think is also interesting is not just do they go away from Malzahn because he's not good, but you've also got to replace Malzahn with someone. And you start looking around to say, is there someone out there worth replacing Malzahn with? Is there a rising star in the coaching ranks that you feel like you've got to get before somebody else gets him? You see some rumors coming out of Purdue that Jeff Brom may be leaving the Boilermakers, may go take a job at a place like Louisville, a place that he's got some geographic ties. Now, Louisville's no great job. That's a university that's had incredible turmoil as of late. But if Brom is the next big thing in coaching, is this the kind of thing that would make a school like Auburn or maybe another SEC school that's maybe somewhat dissatisfied with its coach? Probably not a ton of those other than Auburn at the moment, but is this the kind of thing that would make a school like that want to act fast? It's not just replacing a coach, it's also who you replace him with, and I think that could be an interesting thing to watch here. Malzahn, I believe, is going to stay at Auburn next season, but the dissatisfaction growing around him among Auburn fans, that's maybe not going anywhere. One more quick story here as part of our SEC through. Playoff rankings come out again tonight. From a Georgia standpoint, what's interesting is what happens to Florida after getting a come-from-behind win against South Carolina, how far Kentucky falls after having lost. Auburn, which was ranked a week ago, is not going to be ranked this week. In other words, these Georgia wins they've gotten as of late, how good do they look in the committee's eyes once this once these rankings come out again this week. For the most part, Georgia's drama-free, though, because it's a win and you're in scenario. But the resume debate is still somewhat interesting, and Georgia will see how its resume looks after these rankings come out tonight. We'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, resume issues should not be any kind of problem for Georgia come 2028, 2029, 2030, when it's playing Clemson and Texas in home-and-home series. I think this is a really exciting piece of news, and I know it's way long into the future, but I think this is the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to be, pretty thrilled by, ought to be pretty excited by, that Georgia's making this proactive scheduling, scenario. And I guess I didn't really quite realize this when the announcement first came out yesterday, but, upon further review, Georgia's actually going to play Clemson and Texas in the same year in 2029. I don't know what that means for the future of the Georgia Tech series. I'm assuming it means nothing, or just the future of college football scheduling in general. Is that the way every schedule is going to look come 2029? But it's kind of an interesting deal. And the other thing that's also interesting to me about this is that I believe Georgia's trip to Notre Dame last year is the catalyst that's driven all of this. Georgia goes to Notre Dame. It's this huge showing. Georgia fans take over the city of Chicago, take over South Bend. It's one of the great scenes in Georgia football history and recent college football history. To go back in time here just for a moment to set up a different point, here is Kirby Smart praising those Georgia fans for just how they dominated in the Midwest last September.
I'll tell you what I'm proud of. I'm proud of our fans. Proud of the fact they came out and tons of them were here. The video shots I saw from Chicago before the game and the takeover when we got here, that played a role in this game. That we never felt like it was so much of a road game. I mean, there was time our quarterback was able to go on his own cadence, which you don't usually get to do on the road. Definitely don't get to do on the road in the SEC. Fan base don't let you do that. We were able to go on ours, and I think a lot of it had to do with the red and black that was in the stadium.
So obviously there's a hope that Georgia can do the same thing in future years when it goes to Austin, or maybe even at Clemson as well. Probably a little harder at Clemson than at Texas, but you get the gist. But overall, the scene that Georgia put on in South Bend a year ago, I think, has changed scheduling philosophies. Used to be we saw a lot of non-conference games played at neutral sites. I think the home-and-home, like the one that Georgia has with Notre Dame, Notre Dame comes to Athens next season, and the one that Georgia's got upcoming with Clemson and Texas, is the way of the future here. So much so we've seen Alabama get involved with this. They've got their own deal coming up with Texas. They scheduled another home-and-home with Notre Dame too, so they're getting involved with that. And Saban didn't credit Georgia for the reason why they're making the change, but when they did announce these new schedules with programs like Texas and Notre Dame, Saban said, much like what Georgia's doing, that this is the way all this stuff is going in the future.
I think the philosophy has always been that, we want to add at least one quality opponent to our schedule. And other than the Penn State home-and-home since I've been here, we've never been able to get that worked out like we want to. Our administration is working really hard on it. So consequently, we've played in a lot of the neutral site games to get a good opponent. And I know you guys have heard about some of the things that we're working on, but when we have something to report on that, we'll be glad to tell you about it. But I don't really have anything to report on it right now.
So what Saban didn't say but could have said, because we saw how cool it was when Georgia went to Notre Dame, we want to do the same thing. Now they are. They're going to Texas here as well. And I guess 2 quick points to finish this off. As much fun as these neutral site non-conference games are, home-and-home is just better. And it's really cool to know that I believe that Georgia played a big part in ushering in this brand-new era. And Georgia's also continuing that in 2028, 2029 with programs like Texas and Clemson. It's a good time to be a Dog fan. All right, we will wrap up here with a couple of things here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. First of all, speaking of neutral site games, of course, Georgia has, over the last 2 years, dominated that Florida series down in Jacksonville. We think that's going to continue for a while, and we celebrate that every day here on DawgNation Daily by reminding you it has now been 745 days since Florida has beaten Georgia, since any Florida fan has had any right to do any trash talking against the Dogs, and the lousy stinking Gators are going to stay in their place here for, we think, many more days to come. And we'll do our Gator updater each day here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. Let me also say this. Tonight, a big night for Georgia basketball. The Tom Crean era, which got off to a nice start on Friday with a win against Savannah State, a game in which Georgia scored more than 100 points, an incredible pace for the Dogs against Savannah State. They have a very different kind of game tonight in Philly against Temple. Dogs 3.5-point underdog there, so Best of luck to the Creans and the Dogs up there in Philadelphia. We'll see you tomorrow here on DawgNation Daily. And on video, we got some time for your comments here. We'll roll through some of these. I did go long with Jeff, so I've kind of bled into the next hour. So if some of you have to go, I apologize for that. But if you can stick around, we'll try to take as many comments as we can in the few minutes that we do have together here. A lot of recruiting on today's show. You want to weigh in on that, we'll give you a chance to. You want to look ahead to anything else still to come on Georgia's schedule, we'll give you a chance to do that as well. And it's just a fun conversation, a good time here. So we'll do a lot of that with you. Let me pull up the Facebook comments, and then we'll take a few of those. We'll pull up the YouTube comments, take a few of those, and then we will just be rolling here. Wayne Folan asked a really good question. He says, B.A., what do you think the Fromm Field situation looks like next year? I think that's a good question. First of all, I don't think that Justin Fields is going to transfer. If he does, it's certainly his free choice to do so. And if he does, I'll be disappointed. I believe that he will be here, and I believe it'll be very much an open competition. But one thing I will admit, though, is that Kirby Smart has done an incredible job of keeping us guessing this season about the way all this is going to play out. Fields doesn't play when you assume that he will, like against Florida, for instance, and then plays a decent amount the 2 games after that when it seemed obvious that he may be sort of heading for a spot on the bench. So Kirby's done a pretty good job of keeping us guessing, and maybe he'll keep us guessing throughout the offseason on this too. I do believe it's an open competition. And here's what I think we've learned over the last couple of weeks, that it's not a given that in that open competition, Fields is eventually going to win, because that's what a lot of people assume. They assume that Fields, the better overall prospect, the more dynamic runner, the guy that has the extra dimension to his game that Fromm seemingly doesn't have, that he will eventually overtake Fromm. And if he's not overtaking Fromm, it's because he's not being given a fair chance. What we saw with Fields playing some extended time against Auburn on Saturday is that Fromm is not necessarily going to be a very easy quarterback to beat out, because he's used his experience to his advantage, and he, as a player, I think, keeps getting better. It does not mean, though, that Fromm is a given to win this competition either. I think that both guys will be given a chance, and obviously next season, even though by that point in time Fromm's a junior, if Fields is still here, I don't think we're in a scenario where he's only playing 1 or 2 snaps a game and he's just sort of running in to do the casual running play. He's either playing a lot more than that, or he's probably not here at all. That would be the best overall guess that I can have. But let's face it, we've all been grasping at straws trying to figure out how this is going to play out. But as it stands right now, that's about the best guess that I have. JY says Ben Cleveland's coming back according to Kirby. Yeah, I think that's I think getting Ben Cleveland back for these crucial games near the end of the season is going to be very important. Justin and Michelle McGee asked, BA, does Zeus take the number 2 or number 3 spot back when healthy? All I know is that I had had some conversations with some people who were very optimistic about Zamir White before he tore his ACL. That's caused him to miss the 2018 season. There was a lot of optimism about that. And, as a non-medical professional, it's difficult to know how a second ACL tear on a different knee impacts that. If it's the same thing with Nick Chubb, we would all say that Chubb was not quite as good in 2016 as he was in 2017. Maybe Zamir White is in a similar situation where the 2019 version of him is not the best overall version of him. We have to wait a little while to see that. And if so, that means, this counts towards his NFL eligibility. You may not get a whole lot of Zamir White in a Georgia uniform if that's necessarily the case, which is a sad thing to think about given the fact that it feels like we talked about him so much before he signed with Georgia, but that's just the way that life works. But I still am a big believer that White, who has shown some of this superhuman intensity when it comes to injury recovery in the past, he'll show that again, and eventually we'll see the best of him. It's just a question for me of, do you get that in 2019? Do you get that in 2020? Because if you go back and look at Chubb in 2016, other than the North Carolina game, I'm not sure how often we saw the Chubb that we thought really looked like Nick Chubb. But obviously in 2017 was a very different story. Alan Verbanchik asks an important question. Says, can a running back come back from both knees being injured? I would assume that he probably can, but I also will admit I don't know how much harder it is. Is it better to have two different knees dealing with an ACL injury as opposed to an ACL injury on the same knee more than once. I know the one injury that Chubb was thought to have suffered in 2015 was thought to have been far worse because of the number of ligaments that were involved in that. So, maybe the Zamir White situation just altogether very different. It's probably something we should do some good investigating on in the offseason because clearly, I'm going to need a medical professional to tell me about that because I just don't know. But it's certainly a very fair question. Chip Gromlich brings up an interesting point that Nick Chubb now owns the Cleveland Browns' all-time record long run. It's not Jim Brown anymore, which is an amazing thing to think, and it's really, really cool to see how quickly that Chubb has found himself a home there in Cleveland. So much so that they make the trade. They sent Hyde, the running back. They traded him to open the door for more playing time for Nick Chubb. I guess that was also partially a move to give Duke Johnson a little bit more time too, maybe, but clearly they thought enough about Nick Chubb to kind of put him more towards that featured role, and he's done a great job in that spot. Robert Barnes says, "Oh, BA, come on, please stop giving all this time to Fromm and Fields. There's better topics out there." Now, Robert, to be fair, I was asked one question. I gave one answer. It's not like we've done wall-to-wall Fromm versus Fields, but I can understand that's a tired subject for some of you. John William Adams says that Nick Chubb hopefully has a Frank Gore career as a professional. It is amazing, and y'all know I love college football a lot more than I, like the NFL. But I obviously follow the league. You can't not. It's a ubiquitous, sports product. I had no idea that Frank Gore is now like the number 4 running back in NFL history in terms of rushing yards. It's insane to think of all the guys that he surpassed with his running here. It's crazy to think the kind of career that Gore, the one-time Miami Hurricane, has had in the NFL. I guess a lot of that comes in San Francisco. He's also bounced around a little bit since then, but an incredible number. There's also, speaking of stats, and I don't know when I'll have time to talk about this in the regular show. This week, is it Missouri and Tennessee? So let me ask you this, Dog fans. We have seen, as of late, Drew Lock pass Eric Zier on the all-time SEC passing yards list. Zier, great career at UGA, unbelievable record total there in terms of yards. Drew Lock did just recently surpass him. And on Saturday, I may have the numbers slightly wrong. I may have this completely wrong, but I think I'm at least in the ballpark. I believe that Lock is about 200 or so yards away from passing David Green on passing yards as well. And I don't think you'll catch Aaron Murray, who had just a ridiculous career. It's shocking how good Aaron Murray's stats were at Georgia. But this week, Locke can pass David Green. Is that enough to root for the Tennessee defense? I think for most of you, you'd probably say no. But holding Drew Lock in place in terms of passing yards, would that be at least a consideration that the Tennessee defense might have some success there? I think I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a emphatic no, but I did notice the way that Locke was climbing those charts as of late. So do with that what you will, I guess. Miriam Martin Corbin says Bama goes for it on 4th down Saturday when they were up 24-0 or so. Nobody complains. Auburn coaching players. Why? Oh, this is about the this is about the running up the score thing. Yeah, listen, I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't give a rip about Georgia, quote, running up the score against Auburn. I'm not the least bit worried about that. I think that if Kirby and Malzahn don't like each other, that's not the worst thing in the world for college football. I think from a Georgia fan standpoint, the fact that we've got some, as one of our commenters said yesterday, a little bit of a healthy edge that Kirby Smart brings to games against Dan Mullen at Florida, Malzahn at Auburn. I would suggest even Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech based on some of Kirby's previous comments about that series. I think that's all good for Georgia. I got no problem with that whatsoever. And I just am not scandalized by going for an extra touchdown late in the game. Alan Verbanchik says, hopefully Georgia's offensive lineman can come out of the Georgia Tech game without any knee injuries. Yeah, obviously, it's always the defensive lineman that you think of in that regard because of, the cut blocking. I haven't followed this story that closely, but for a while there this season, they had really cracked down on cut block. So much so that a lot of the option offenses, and this is not a joke, it's not like a swipe, this is serious. They'd cut down on cut blocking. The officials had emphasized penalties on cut blocking so much that a lot of the option offenses were not doing as well. Navy was struggling early in the season. I don't know if they've stopped calling this or what, because Tech has played a lot better as of late. Army is, there's a chance Army's ranked the top 25 tonight. So some of these option teams are doing better now. Maybe they stopped, blowing the whistle on the cut block plays. But early in the season, they were really, really calling that hard. So I don't watch option teams a lot, so I don't really know what's going to be like next Saturday. But at one point in time this season, I know they were pretty serious about that. Hank Watson says, BA, what college has produced the most Super Bowl MVPs? Name the school and the players. I know Georgia's had a lot, right? Hines Ward's a Super Bowl MVP. Terrell Davis, I believe, is a Super Bowl MVP. Was Jake Scott a Super Bowl MVP with Miami in the early 70s? Who else am I leaving out there? That's a good trivia question, though. A really good trivia question. Let me go over here to YouTube just for a moment. Over on YouTube, Jay Bolton says, someone said that Tyson Campbell might do better at safety. What do you guys think? So, Jay, you may remember a few months ago, Jeff Sintel and I would talk about this a lot, that Jeff was of the belief that Tyson Campbell looked like a natural star. And he compared him to, by star, I mean nickelback, fifth defensive back. He compared him to Minkah Fitzpatrick, similar body style, similar athleticism. Minkah obviously had a great career at Alabama. And what I would always say in response back to that was, obviously, no Georgia fan would turn down a chance to have a player as good as Minkah Fitzpatrick. If that's the role that Campbell could fill for Georgia, it'd be a great one. But what I always said, though, is that if Campbell's not a true cornerback, Georgia's going to lose some of its potential edge by having a guy like that. There are just a few positions that I believe to be premium positions. I think offensive tackle is an example of this. I think cornerback's an example of this. A lot of guys will tell you they're an offensive tackle, but they turn out to be a guard. A lot of guys will tell you they're a cornerback, but they turn out to be a safety. It's easier to find safeties, with all due respect to the very good ones that are out there. It's just easier to find safeties than it is true cornerbacks that can run with the best receivers. So if next year they were to say, well, Tyson Campbell, I guess come to find out you're just a really good safety. That'd be good news to have a good safety, but it would not be the best possible news, because the best possible news is that Campbell really sticks at cornerback. However, here's the one thing I've got to be emphatic about, and I'm not going to change my mind on this. Tyson Campbell, I believe, is going to be a superstar cornerback at Georgia. The fact that he's played as much as he has as a freshman, I think, is the only evidence that I need on this. Freshman is a very hard position to play as a cornerback is a very hard position to play as a freshman. Sometimes you have to, stay with the inverted sentences. Cornerback's a very hard position to play as a freshman. Go and look. I like to do this from time to time. Go and look at the all-SEC team, not the freshman all-SEC team, but the all-SEC team in itself, and look to see how many freshmen have been all-SEC cornerbacks. A guy like Vernon Hargraves comes to mind, but he became a first-round pick. For the most part, experience matters in the secondary, cornerback in particular. So you want the best of Campbell next year, and then in 2020, you want the best of him in the future. You got to earn that right now. And you know what? The Georgia coaches, Mel Tucker, Kirby Smart, thought it was better on Saturday to put Eric Stokes in the game instead of Tyson Campbell. That's fine. That may have been the right decision there. I think in the long run, all of this only makes Campbell better. Playing has made him better. Watching on Saturday probably makes him better, because there are some things you probably only learn by watching, especially when you can compare that to some of the on-field experience you have. I am not changing my mind on Campbell at all. I know right now it seems like he's been a weak link of this Georgia defense. I'm fine with that. Georgia's still winning games, and it's still winning games for more than 2 touchdowns. You better believe that Jeremy Pruitt and Dan Mullen and Gus Malzahn and Nick Saban, they cower in fear about the number of freshmen that Georgia's giving experience to right now, the fact that it's not costing Georgia anything. Now, they lost LSU, but Georgia's still very much a playoff team. It's not costing Georgia anything, and it's only setting Georgia up to be even better next year. I know this sounds like I'm just saying what some of you want to hear, but I just think it's objectively true. Campbell was good enough to start this season, which means as an experienced sophomore, he's only going to be better. I feel very strongly about that. K9 Blue says, BA, what freshman impressed you the most Saturday as more continue to play meaningful snaps? That's a good question. Let me think about that for a moment. I mean, I do love Adam Anderson. I just think that Anderson's body type is so impressive. You know, that long frame, those long arms. You know, to think about what he's going to be as he continues to grow and develop, and the fact that the light has come on enough for him, because back after signing day, he was not necessarily one of the 5 stars that I thought would be most likely to play early in his freshman season. But the fact that he's getting that chance now, I think that's really exciting. I think that's really exciting. Jay Bolton also says that Brenton Cox is going to be a freak. Yeah, Georgia had to play without him on Saturday. But Brenton, man, he looks good. He looks good. Seth Auld says BA discussed the linebacker position. Obviously, that's one of those positions that you do have some concern about right now on the field. If Georgia doesn't make the playoff, if Georgia doesn't win the SEC, could be that just Roquan Smith proved too difficult to replace. That's a reasonable outcome for a season. That Georgia was really good and came close to being as good as it was a year ago. But as it turns out, losing a Butkus Award winner at linebacker just was too much to overcome. It could very well be the case. But what I saw against Kentucky gives me hope. Now, you didn't see as much of that against Auburn for, I guess, various reasons. But I do hold out some hope that a collection of these guys, you know, now Monty Rice as a sophomore, I think is a fixture as a run-stopping linebacker right now. But putting one of those speedy guys next to him, I think that could be really fun to think about. I really do. Doug Rayburn said, did y'all see Adam Anderson bull rush and then chase down the quarterback? Yeah, I mean, I would have guessed if you missed that against Auburn, you're going to see a lot of that in the years to come. Nick Bonanno also bring up a good point that it took until year 3 before Roquan truly became Roquan. That's right. I think he had 95 tackles as a sophomore, so he was a good player, but he became an all-time great player as a junior and became a first-round draft pick in that same season as well. Malcolm Ogletree says, how many running backs will Georgia take in 2019? I think it's a really interesting question, Malcolm. Obviously, they want to get the one big target. Do they take a second running back as well? I think that's kind of interesting. J.Y. says, once again on the subject of Campbell at safety, he says he was such a beast in high school at safety. He closes so fast that no one and his one-on-one is greatest concern coming to college, and I think at this point that's showing up, try him at safety. So Jay obviously referencing something we talked about before. I think if you got Campbell at cornerback, you're just getting his best use. It's sort of like when in baseball, when a shortstop becomes an outfielder, when a third baseman becomes an outfielder, or when a catcher becomes a first baseman. You're moving away from a premium position to a position where it's just easier to find people. I mean, go back and look at your baseball cards when you're growing up. You know, look at all the good outfielders. Every era has a million good outfielders. But put a stack of the best shortstops, put a stack of the best third baseman, stack of the best second baseman. That's always going to be a lot shorter stack. Stack of outfielders this high. Stack all the baseball cards of the good shortstops from any era right next to it's going to be a lot shorter. To me, football's the same way when it comes to cornerbacks and safety. There are a ton of great safeties. There's a lot fewer, really good quality cornerbacks. So y'all may all be right. And Tyson Campbell may go on to have an all-time great career at Georgia as a safety. Jeff Sintel so much as predicted that before his career began. If that'd be the case, I'm obviously not going to turn down a chance to have a really good safety. But I'm hoping that he is the cornerback that I believe he can be. William Elaine Morgan says safety is a harder position to learn. From a cerebral standpoint, safety, I'm sure, is an incredibly difficult position to learn because you got to worry about what's in front of you and what's behind you. I'm not denying that, but I mean, you can see the money that NFL teams paid all these lockdown cornerbacks to give you an idea of the value of that as a position. Justin Brooks says, have you heard any news on Jaden Hazelwood? I haven't really heard any news on Hazelwood, but my opinion on Hazelwood hasn't really changed. I think when you look at the overall landscape for Hazelwood, the thing that makes me feel really good about him eventually landing back at Georgia is that he doesn't have a great reason to go to Auburn. Remember, Benjamin Wolk, our buddy and now reporter for Rivals.com, was on the show last week saying that the visit that Hazelwood took to Auburn for the Texas A&M game didn't go well, that most official visits include 2 overnight stays. Hazelwood left the visit early for whatever reason. So, I mean, I think that's enough to cross Auburn off the list. And then there's the Miami stuff. I know many of you have seen Hazelwood on social media, always with the pictures of the Miami gear. Miami's a mess. I mean, I think there's I don't want to overstate this, but I think there's at least some chance that Rick's not coaching there next year. I mean, is that unfair to say that maybe there's at least some chance that either Rick decides this ain't worth it or Miami decides whatever? I mean, they lost to Tech on Saturday. This has really turned into a pretty ugly season for Miami a year after they had a lot of hopes in 2017. Even if Rick is there, there's no good vibe around that program at all right now. And none of these kids go to Oklahoma. I mean, I know Hazelwood's father, I guess, is an Oklahoma grad. None of these kids ever go west of the Mississippian line. They just don't. Hazelwood, I don't believe, is going to Oklahoma. And he'd go there and probably put up 1 billion receiving yards. But I just don't believe he's going to. So unless some, mystery candidate pops up here out of nowhere, and you can probably guess as to who those might be, unless some mystery school pops up, I think that by process of elimination, you're back to Georgia being the most likely outcome. I think a lot of times, that's kind of the way that I do this. I sort of, as a person who's always trying to make the best guess about what's going to happen here, I think sometimes knowing who you can disqualify is as important as knowing who the leader is going to be. Because by the time you start marking off the easy disqualifications, or at least the likely disqualifications, you get to the best possible answer. Kim Rogers also mentions that Otis Reese plays against Auburn. Not only that, Reese comes in and gets his first start. Now, he leaves the game on the second play of the game, but Reese gets the start right there. And you want to talk about somebody that was just built to be a safety at the SEC level. Otis Reese, who was listed as a linebacker in high school, was just, created by God to play this nickelback position in these really top-flight SEC defenses. He's just, he's got, he almost feels to me like that star that you don't have to take out of the game. Because obviously against a team like Auburn, there was actually a pretty interesting, I guess, debate coming out of Auburn after the game on Saturday, not to get in the weeds too much. But there was some criticism of Malzahn that he was substituting too much, that Auburn's at its best when it's Auburn fast, when the Gus bus is running and they keep the same personnel and just keep hurrying up. And Malzahn, as he has a tendency to do, maybe try to get a little too cute and did too much substituting, which slowed down the pace with which Auburn was playing. I thought it was kind of a fascinating debate coming out of Auburn. Malzahn was asked about this in his post-game press conference on Saturday. Anyway, the point is, when you're playing a really good spread team, like Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl, for instance, you want to have guys that you don't have to substitute. As it stands right now, Georgia does a lot of substituting at star. You've got run stars and pass stars. A guy that can help you in the run, or a guy that, is only in the game to mostly run with extra wide receivers. And best I can tell, Otis Reese looks like he can do both. I mean, that's a guy you can just put in the game and leave him there, especially as he gets a little older. I just think Otis Reese is valuable to Georgia. He is fantastic. Santiago Diarn says, B.A., right now, do you think Nick Chubb would win Rookie of the Year? That's a good question. Who is the favorite for NFL Rookie of the Year? I'm asking Connor Riley. Over Chubb? Mayfield's like, hold on. Excuse me one second. He's like bottom of the league in passing, though, right? He says that Baker Mayfield. That's not. I'm going with Nick Chubb. If I thought there was going to be some other rookie that had some great year. If the candidate is Baker Mayfield, I'm taking Chubb over that. Jeremy Hunsley says it's Saquon Barkley. All I know about Barkley is he didn't play well against the Falcons. Is Barkley having a really good year? Oh, it's okay. Is it better than Chubb thus far? And it's okay to say if it is. He's probably getting a lot more touches too, right? Barkley did not have a good game against the Falcons, but Christopher White says that Saquon Barkley's killing it. Chris Branham says that Chubb's outgained Barkley. Shelton Tugger says on the subject of Justin Fields, Kevin Drummer also Ken Blankenship says I'm dissing on Connor Mohawk. So Ken Blankenship has given you the nickname Connor Mohawk. I like that. I can go with that. That's a pretty good job, Ken. Pretty good job. Marcus Davis brings up Roquan Smith as possible. Is there a defensive rookie of the year? Is Roquan a candidate for that? Because Chicago's defense is good, right? He said double-digit tackles the last 2 weeks. Good for Roquan. I mean, it was so obvious that he was going to be good. I'm so happy to see him doing well. So happy. Oh, Martez Fuller brings up a good name, too. How about Calvin Ridley as possible rookie of the year? Falcons wide receiver. He's had a good year, though, right? Although the Falcons, what a disaster that was. We don't talk, a lot of NFL here, but, you go to Cleveland, you lose by 3 touchdowns, whatever it was. That's a disaster. All right, we got to go. We've veered into NFL talk. That means it's time to give ourselves the hook here. All right, really fun stuff. We got a good DN90 today. I don't know if y'all always check out DN90. It's a little short video that we do. Believe it or not, I am capable of doing short videos at times. Kirby Smart on Saturday, right in front of our broadcast for the dog walk, came over and spent some really extended time with some kids. And he didn't know the kids or anything like that. Kirby just does some version of this every week before the dog walk or during the dog walk. But we just happened to catch it on Saturday. We're going to talk about a cool moment for some big-time Georgia fans, some young kids. Really good stuff from Kirby Smart. So we will we'll show you that today as a part of DN90. So I hope you'll check that on the Dog Nation video channels. And then we'll be back to see you tomorrow right here 10 a.m. for another episode of Dog Nation Daily Live presented by Marco's Pizza. Podcast is coming. If you missed a portion of our regular broadcast, that's a great way to check out that. The long, full conversation with Jeff Santel, you'll get all of that. And a fun day tomorrow, too. So we'll see you then. Thanks for being here on Dog Nation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza.